Hi everyone, welcome to Movie World. Robert Waldman coming to you for the last time from beautiful Kelowna. Great place to vacation in British Columbia or from elsewhere. Today I want to talk about a brand new movie that's opening in theaters. Actually not in theaters, it's available video on demand. You can currently order Mr. Jones. That's the name of the movie. You can get it today from the Cineplex store or by the Apple store. And on July the 3rd, this brand new movie, you can order video on demand from your local cable company or internet provider. Let me tell you and set the stage for Mr. Jones. It's actually a true story. It's set in the early 1930s and it's being directed by a lady named Agnieszka Holland. She's a wonderful director from Poland who earlier gave us Europa. This movie is steeped in history. It's all about Russia. We follow the path of a British political fellow who would become a journalist in hopes of getting an interview with Joseph Stalin himself back in the early 1930s in Russia. So the fellow's name, a Welsh journalist, is Gareth Jones. Now, Mr. Jones has a connection to the government because he used to be an advisor to Lloyd George, the Prime Minister. So you might say that gives him sort of an entree into the Soviet Union and to the political powers that be in Russia. So we're going back to the USSR. No, not the Paul McCartney song, but we're going to look at a very important event in world history, the famine in the Ukraine. So when Mr. Jones goes to Moscow, he ends up befriending the New York Times chief head of their bureau named Walter Duarte. Now, Duarte is very closely tied to the powers that be in the Kremlin, and you could say he's very pro-Russia. So him and Jones have a very interesting friendship. Now, the fellow that plays this very important political character, who's supposed to be bipartisan, who's supposed to be away and above politics, is played by Peter Sarsgaard, who was very good in a movie called Kinsey. He played the sex therapist. And Peter Sarsgaard also was pivotal in the movie Jackie, a story about the life of President John F. Kennedy. He played Bobby Kennedy. So you could say Sarsgaard has an interest in politics. He's very good as a New York Times main chief in Moscow. And with all those connections to Russia, he's a bit of a Hugh Hefner kind of guy because he likes having parties. He's really a party animal, but maybe he's too closely tied to the Russian hierarchy. Remember, this is 1930s early Russia, where everything was under the control of a government, sort of like other places today in the communist world. You can't go anywhere without the Russian authorities knowing where are your whereabouts. And this creates a problem for Jones, because not only does he want to interview Stalin, but he also wants to go to the Ukraine. The Ukraine in the 1930s, before that and maybe after that, was considered to be the breadbasket of Russia. That's where all the food, where all the grain came from. So, unbeknownst to the Russian authorities, Mr. Jones, on a tip, decides to travel by train to the Ukraine. Well, what he sees in the Ukraine is shocking. There's famine. People are fighting over food. And this was a real event. This happened. So when he goes back to Moscow to try to get his story published, to try to get the help of the other reporters and the powers that be in Moscow, he is given the cold shoulder. So he luckily hightails it back to England, and then he tries to get his story published. Not an easy task, but somehow, through some way, the connection is made and the story gets out. A lot of people don't believe what was going on in Russia. So it took this fellow, a very courageous journalist, Gareth Jones, to blow the lid off of what was happening in the Ukraine. Again, a true story. Other key members of this cast include Vanessa Kirby, who stars as Ada Brooks. Vanessa Kirby, many of you who follow British television will know her from The Crown. She played Princess Margaret. A very good actress, up-and-comer, and actually Tom Cruise liked her. He cast her in Mission Impossible Fallout from a few years back, and she's going to be appearing in the next 2 Mission Impossible movies, possibly some of which may be filmed perhaps in Canada, maybe in BC, where Tom Cruise has shot and reshot some of the Mission Impossible movies in the past. Also, a little footnote to history. it goes without saying, apparently, that Mr. Jones, Gareth Jones's plight, exposing what was going on in Russia, was in fact the inspiration for George Orwell's Animal Farm. So, a very good movie, a documentary. No, it's not really a documentary. It's a fictionalized account of what really went on in Russia during that era. I would say if you like history, this is well worth seeing. It's not going to get a big lavish release. I saw, apparently, I should say, my wife saw this movie at the Vancouver International Film Festival late last year. So certain people who follow film festival movies will know about this movie. If you haven't heard about this movie, you should watch it, order it on demand, because there's an old saying, if you don't remember history, you're bound to repeat it. Mr. Jones, on a scale of 1 to 10, I should say also that James Norton and Peter Sarsgaard appeared in the same movie a number of years ago called An Education, about a young woman in Britain in college who had a relationship or romantic entanglement with two characters. James Norton does a very good job in this movie. This is great atmosphere, and Ms. Holland does a very good job at recreating the tension and the atmosphere in this grueling time in Russia, which is why on a scale of 1 to 10, I have to give Mr. Jones, I'm going to give it a very honorable 7. I like the movie. It's serious, it's impactful, very emotional, and quite stirring. Thank you for watching today, Movie World. Robert Waldman. Hope to see you soon.